This is the VOA Special English Health Report. Severe bleeding, also called hemorrhage, causes 1/3 of pregnancy-related deaths in Asia and Africa. The World Health Organization has been recommending several ways to reduce the risk of hemorrhage immediately after birth. These include giving the mother a hormone called oxytocin. It helps the uterus expel the placenta or afterbirth. Another recommendation to help expel the placenta has been to use what is called controlled cord traction. In this procedure, the birth attendant gently pulls on the umbilical cord while pushing upwards on the mother's stomach. Dr. Metin Gulmazoglu of the World Health Organization led a study on the effectiveness of controlled cord traction. He says it is not easy to perform, and if it is not done by people who are skilled in doing it, then it can harm the mother. The study involved more than 23,000 pregnant women who had vaginal births. The births happened in 16 hospitals and 2 primary health care centers in 8 countries. These were Argentina, Egypt, India, Kenya, the Philippines, South Africa, Thailand, and Uganda. About half of the mothers received a so-called full package of measures, including controlled cord traction. The other women gave birth helped only by gravity and pushing by the mother. Both groups of women received injections of oxytocin immediately after giving birth. The study showed that on average, both groups had about the same amount of blood loss. The study found that controlled cord traction had very little effect in reducing the risk of serious blood loss, defined as a liter or more. There was serious blood loss in 1.9% of the women who received the procedure, compared to 2.1% of those in the simplified group. Dr. Gulmazoglu says using oxytocin was much more important than pulling on the umbilical cord to reduce blood loss. He says the main factor that helps to reduce blood loss after birth is the oxytocin, the medication that helps the uterus to contract. Oxytocin is injected, but only into the muscle. This makes it easier to administer for birth attendants with little training. Also, the hormone does not cost very much, but it can lose its effectiveness if stored at high temperatures. The WHO may recommend single-use syringes with sensors to warn of exposure to high temperature. The WHO is expected to change its guidelines based on the new findings. The study is in the Lancet Medical Journal. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Health Report. The United States government recently announced a major education and research campaign against Alzheimer's disease. The brain-wasting disease has no cure. The plan includes more efforts to develop drugs to prevent it. In the United States, more than 5 million people have Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia. As the population gets older, the number is expected to reach almost 8 million by 2030. By then, experts say Alzheimer's and other dementia disorders could affect as many as 66 million people worldwide. The National Alzheimer's Plan calls on scientists to develop treatments to prevent the disease by 2025. Officials at the National Institutes of Health have promised $50 million to help support that effort. NIH held a conference of the nation's top Alzheimer's researchers, where NIH Director Francis Collins discussed the plan. He said that researchers have learned more about the disease in the past few years than probably ever before. Early next year, scientists at the Banner Alzheimer's Institute in Arizona plan to begin human testing of an experimental drug. The drug is called crenezumab, and the hope is that it will prevent Alzheimer's. The study will involve members of a large extended family living in villages in the Medellin area in Colombia. Some of the family members have a rare genetic disorder that causes them to get early onset Alzheimer's. They begin to show signs of mental loss in their mid-40s and fully develop the disease by their early 50s. 300 people have agreed to be in the study. 1/3 of them will receive crenezumab. The others will be given a placebo, a pill that does not contain any drug. They will not know if they have been given the drug or the placebo. The study will also include a smaller number of people in the United States. Pierre Tarrio will help lead the study, known as a human trial. He says all of the people have been informed that the drug might not work, or that they might receive a placebo. Mr. Tarrio says the people still wanted to be in the study because the disease has affected every generation for centuries. Scientists hope that if the drug works in those facing early onset Alzheimer's, then it might also help older adults. The study in Colombia could take as long as 5 years, but researchers believe they could get results in 2 years. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
This is the VOA Special English Health Report. The Obama administration announced its national HIV/AIDS strategy in July. The plan aims to reduce new HIV infections by 25% within 5 years. It also aims to make sure infected patients get treatment more quickly. HIV is the virus that causes AIDS. The government says 65% of Americans who discover they are infected get treatment within 3 months. The new plan calls for increasing that to 85%. $30 million from the healthcare reform law is to go to support prevention activities, including expanded HIV testing. Over 1 million Americans are living with the virus, out of an estimated 33 million people worldwide. In July, government scientists in the United States announced the discovery of 2 antibodies that raise hopes for an AIDS vaccine. They say these antibodies can stop more than 90% of all known strains of HIV. Antibodies are proteins that the body makes to help protect itself against infection. Researchers made the discovery at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. The director of its Vaccine Research Center, Gary Nabel, says each antibody blocks the virus from attaching to white blood cells. The antibodies were discovered in a man known as donor 45, whose body produced them naturally. Patients with HIV must take medicine all their lives to prevent AIDS. Combinations of drugs are able to suppress the deadly virus in the body. If not a cure, then the next best thing. In another development, the United Nations reported that the number of young people becoming infected with HIV in Africa is falling. The UN AIDS Agency gives credit to better use of preventive measures. It says young people in Africa are waiting longer to have sex. They are also having fewer sexual partners, and they are increasingly using condoms. As a result, the agency says HIV rates are falling in 16 of the 25 hardest-hit countries in Africa. The biggest drop was in Kenya, where the infection rate among 15 to 24-year-olds fell by a reported 60%. And that's the VOA Special English Health Report. Tell us about prevention efforts in your community. You can comment on our website at voaspecialenglish.com or on Facebook at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Health Report. A concussion happens when the brain is shaken, often in a car crash or a fall or a strike to the head in sports. Concussions can be mild, but doctors may order a CT scan to look for a more serious injury. Computed tomography provides a detailed image of the brain. But a recent study warns that more children than necessary are being exposed to radiation this way. A national team led by 2 doctors at the University of California, Davis, studied hospital records from thousands of children with head injuries. They found that in many cases, the risk of developing cancer from the radiation outweighed the risk of a serious brain injury. The study found that 1 in 5 children over age 2 had a low risk of serious injury, but received CT scans anyway. The same was true of almost 1 in 4 children under 2 years of age. The researchers have developed rules to predict if a head injury is serious enough for a scan. For children under 2, doctors are advised against it if there is normal mental activity, no swelling in the back of the head, no feeling of a broken bone in the skull, and no loss of consciousness for more than 5 seconds. Doctors should also consider how the child was injured and whether the parents say the child is acting normally. For patients from 2 to 18, the guidelines are similar, except there should be no loss of consciousness, no vomiting, and no severe headache. The report appears in the Lancet Medical Journal. Earlier this year, the British Journal of Sports Medicine published new guidelines for concussions in children and teens. International experts said they should not return to sports or school until fully recovered. The brain also needs a cognitive rest, they say, by restricting activities like video games, texting, and watching TV. Young people often take longer than adults to recover from a concussion. The experts say individual progress and not a set time period should always guide a decision to return to play. More than 1 million cases of concussion are reported each year in the United States alone. A congressional committee held a hearing in October to discuss legal issues related to head injuries in football. Recently, there have been concerns about players retired from the National Football League. But professionals are not the only ones getting concussions. There are high school players who have died from brain injuries. And that's the VOA Special English Health Report.
This is the VOA Special English Health Report. The Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria was created in 2002. It is an alliance of business, government, and civilian partnerships. A new report from the Global Fund says almost 5 million lives have been saved through the 600 programs it supports. The programs operate in 144 countries, many in sub-Saharan Africa. The Global Fund has approved proposals for more than $19 billion to fight HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. The report says 2.5 million people infected with HIV now are being treated with antiretroviral medicines. It says there has been a major decrease in AIDS deaths in many countries as a result. The report also says about 6 million people with active tuberculosis are being treated for the disease. The number of deaths from TB is dropping around the world. The Global Fund has given out more than 100 million bed nets in its battle against malaria. The bed nets are treated with a poison to kill mosquitoes. The report says 10 of the countries in Africa with the highest cases of malaria have reported decreases in new cases. An increasing number of countries are reporting a drop of more than 50% in malaria deaths, the report says. Rifat Atun is Director of Strategy, Performance, and Evaluation at the Global Fund. He says the programs the fund supports saved at least 3,600 lives every day last year. And he says more lives can be saved in the future if the programs continue to receive the money they need. Rifat Atun says we can look forward to a world that is free of HIV infection in children. And he says we can end transmission of HIV from mother to child. The Global Fund was established as a financial tool. It has several guiding ideas. It works to support programs that come from national plans and goals. It tries to find balance in dealing with places, diseases, and interventions. And the Global Fund is open in its work to avoid corruption or the appearance of corruption. Most of the money for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria comes from the world's leading industrial nations. And that's the VOA Special English Health Report. For more health news, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
This is the VOA Special English Health Report. A few months ago, government researchers released the latest American Time Use Survey. It included the average time per day that Americans spent providing child care between 2006 and 2010. Among adults living with children under age 6, women spent 1 hour and 6 minutes a day providing physical care, like bathing or feeding. Men spent 26 minutes. Yet a new study suggests that men are biologically designed to care for their children. It confirmed that testosterone levels drop after men become fathers. Testosterone is the main sex hormone responsible for the changes when a boy develops into a man. Women also produce testosterone, but in much lower amounts. Earlier studies showed that fathers have lower levels of testosterone than childless men. Christopher Kuzawa at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, says there are at least 2 possible explanations. Is it that fatherhood reduces your testosterone? Or do men with low testosterone to begin with, are they more likely to become fathers? And so what we did is we followed men through time and measured their hormones before and after they became fathers. The researchers used findings from a long-term study of men in the Philippines. Their testosterone levels were measured in 2005 and 2009. Some of the men were childless. Others became fathers during that time. And those were the men where the researchers saw the largest decline in testosterone. The study found that levels dropped by about half immediately after the birth of a child, then rose some. Men who were active in childcare produced less than those who were not active. Testosterone may drop in fathers to get them to pay more attention to parenting than to reproducing. But Professor Kuzawa says there are other good reasons as well. Having high levels of testosterone can increase your risk for diseases like prostate cancer and testicular cancer. The study is in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Studies have shown a similar drop in other mammals and in birds after mating periods to allow for caregiving. Animal studies have also shown that the greater the involvement of males, the lower their testosterone levels. We asked Thomas McDade, another author of the study, if levels also drop in men who adopt children. That is an interesting question, he says, and the next obvious thing to study. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.